I would invite you just to have a look around the room, the Zoom room that we're in, and kind of say hi and hello and just wave a little and just, acknowledge, fantastic, that we are indeed in this Zoom room together, in this hive of industry and education. We're together. We've thought about and must pay absolute tribute to Anne and Lisa for their holding of this and their flexibility and their willingness to shape and shift things as we go through. And what we thought last night after we met with Romina as well, who's also a guardian of the GRLI, that what it would be really, really good to do is just to give a little chance for some catching up from yesterday. It was so rich in terms of the contributions that were made. And so having a little bit of moment of reflection together would actually not be a bad thing. And we think that will help. And I really do assure you that the metaphors and references to bees will stop at some point today. But we just thought that some cross-pollination might be really, really helpful as well in terms of hearing where we've been. So in a moment, John is going to invite you to, well, you have no choice, actually. Invite is a ridiculous word to use for this, because you'll find yourself scooted through the ether and into a small group with either 2 or 3 other people. Hopefully, perhaps those that you haven't had a chance yet to catch up with and say hello to, and have an opportunity to consider together what happened yesterday and whether or not there have been any overnight reflections, whether the questions that were posed at the end about what needs to be left behind or what's emerging have done their job and slowly simmered through the consciousness. So any overnight reflections, anything that particularly stayed with you from yesterday, that was new or a surprise or particularly rich in its learning or contribution. And anything that's emerging for you today that you want to work with or think about, and anything which is lessening or diminishing for you. So John's put the questions in chat. So really we're unpressing the pause button and moving straight in. Now, am I right in thinking that perhaps there are people who weren't with us yesterday? Everybody was with us. Okay, so what we find with this is it's really helpful as well because it does jog the memory and refresh us in terms of where we are. So unpressing the pause button, moving straight in, the questions are in chat, just enjoy catching up with each other and refreshing where you've been. John.
How many minutes today?
Oh, sorry, I think 15 minutes if that's okay with you. That would be great.
So it took another 60 seconds.
Okay, that's fine, John. That's great. Welcome back, everyone. If it's worked in the way that it has, we hopefully have got you caught mid-sentence or at least mid-word, with people hanging on to that, what could it have been, that moment of revelation that has just had to pass. And so once again, we apologise. Any minute now, I'm going to hand over to Lisa to take us into the main body of our time together. But first, I'd just like to hold maybe a couple of minutes, just to check with anybody if there is anything from the conversation that you've just had which you would like to share with us. Was it a thought or a moment or a revelation or a surprise, something, but as a headline, if you don't mind, on the grounds that I will be handing over to Lisa very, very soon. And you don't have to, this is a space, so if there isn't anything that's particularly at the top of your agenda, then please feel free not to have to speak and just check. Anything anybody would like to offer?
You know, there was something that Romina said right at the end of our conversation that really struck me, which was, she was talking about the students yesterday and, that it was inspiring to hear them and see what they're, to think about the future. And then just this feeling of, and I don't know, maybe the wrong feeling here, guilt, remorse, frustration, that we have to ask them, that we shouldn't be asking them to solve these problems, right? That this is the mess we made and the people before us made. And we got to have childhoods where nobody told us like that it was our job to go out and fix things. And it's, and it's true. I feel like the responsibility on this, and again, there have been generations before that have had huge responsibilities, but sort of this true existential crisis that faces this generation is, it's sobering.
Thanks, Anne. So very true.
I'd say in our group, one of the things we talked about was, and we all commented on the students and all the presentation yesterday and all the things you're doing at Mason, how impressed we were. But I really, what resonated with me was the project you're doing with Carleton College and the cross-university collaboration. And in one of the breakouts yesterday, our group talked about how can we do more? And I know this group has sort of percolated an idea of a cross-university class. But beyond that, what can we do as a group to have some additional cross-university collaborations? It may be outside the class. It could be co-curricular activities. So that was something we talked about a little bit yesterday and a little bit this morning already.
Right, thank you, Travis. And maybe we can return to that at the end of today, because I know there's some space that we could hold for those kind of questions. Brilliant, thank you. Just maybe room for one more before we hand over, if there is anything at all. No. Well, thank you very much indeed. And I will now hand over to Lisa, if I may, to take us into our next step.
Still learning about mute. I'm gonna figure it out and then we won't need it anymore. Okay, so what I'd like to do, this is not the moment where we say goodbye to the bees yet. We are actually, well, there we go. We are actually going to talk to you a little bit about our honeybee initiative, and I'm delighted to have my co-presenter, Germán Peria, who is the director of the honeybee initiative, join me in this. And John, I believe that you are going to queue up some videos for us, but could you also make Germán a co-host, if you don't mind? That would be really helpful because he's going to share some slides. So basically, our honeybee initiative is really a significant way that our center walks the talk for our students. It demonstrates both how business can work in support of the public good, and it demonstrates the critical role that pollinators face in or play in our society. Okay, this is not cooperating. There we go. So why is this really significant? It's because nearly 40% of all U.S. honeybee colonies already in decline were lost in 2019, and that's the highest level reported. And if bees don't thrive, we don't either. Of the 100 crop varieties that provide 90% of the world's food, 71 are pollinated by bees. In North America, honeybees pollinate all sorts of fruits, 95 varieties of them, avocados, almonds, apples. And the business case for bees is really strong because pollination services are a core component of global agricultural production, valued over at $125 billion annually. So think about that for just a second. The other thing about this is that this on the left is what your grocery store looks like when you have produce produced by bees. On the right-hand side is what happens when you don't have produce that is pollinated by bees. Our choices are limited. The same thing happens for dairy because the products that our dairy-producing animals love to eat, like clover and alfalfa, are also pollinated by bees. Our honeybee initiative, in brief, and I'll just go over this really quickly, we engage in all sorts of research in terms of pollination. We have a partnership with a landfill where we're doing research with our science colleagues on the heavy metals and chemicals that are found in pollen. We also offer all sorts of educational opportunities. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, Herman makes these beautiful candles, but we have over 1,000 people who come to visit the hives annually, and we also use the bees in the College of Education to prepare our educators. We use it in the Health and Human Services, in their nutrition program. We work, the top slide there in the center is what was called a living hive. There was a mold placed in the beehives. The bees did the rest of the work, created this beautiful art, which traveled up and down the East Coast, educating people about the importance of pollinators. We also have a lot of partnerships and global impact. We're going to talk a little bit more about these pictures here, which were taken in Colombia. And I just want to point out, when you hear the word stingless bees, if you see on the upper right-hand corner, that is what a stingless beehive looks like. That is very different than the ones that many of us are familiar with. And the bees are in that photo. They are the size of mosquitoes. They're really tiny, and they are, as their name suggests, sting-free. That doesn't mean that they're defenseless. They do bite, but they don't sting. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to John to open with that first video so that you can get a sense of Herman and what we do in our bee yard. So just pretend that you're in a bee suit and you're actually at our hives with us, because this is what it would be like. Or not.
I'm here today in Fairfax, Virginia with Herman Perilla. He is the director of the George Mason University Honeybee Initiative. And as you can see, we're at our teaching hive locations. And I wanted to ask you a few questions about bees. Like, how many bee species are there in the US and globally?
There are about 20,000 species of bees. In the United States, we have about 4,000, and the highest diversity is found in Yuma, Arizona, where they have over 1,200 species of bees.
And what's so great about Yuma, Arizona?
That's interesting because most of the bees, or where you find the highest diversity of bees in the world, is in the deserts. The other place where you find a huge diversity of bees is in Carmel, Israel. That's the highest diversity of bees in the world.
And is it because they're ground nesting bees?
That's the ground nesting bees.
I think we know, but why are bees so important for the planet, especially now?
The planet as we know it, all the flowers, all the trees are product of pollinators. That's why they are so important, because they are the producers of primary producers. If we don't have pollinators, we won't have carnivores, we won't have any of the animals that we know and take for granted. So this is the basis of life in the planet. That's why they are so important. Honeybees are extremely important pollinators. Why? Because we have them in boxes, and we can transport those boxes wherever we need them to pollinate. 1/3 of the food that we eat is actually pollinated by honeybees. In the United States, the economic worth is $15 billion per year. In the world, it's about $570 billion per year. They affect every part of the food. It is not only fruits, it is also, for example, meat, because whatever cows eat, the alfalfa and everything, is pollinated by bees. So it has a very important effect on food security in the planet.
Thus, it's important to create biodiversity pockets of plants like you see here and create these spaces that both honeybees and native bees can use and thrive and prosper.
What you just said is something that is very, very important. When you use bees for pollination, you take them to a single crop. And when they get to a single crop, they only have one type of diet. For an example, the almond industry in the United States requires, at this moment, 1.5 million colonies. We have in the whole country 2,600,000 bees, so that's actually more than half of the bees that we have in this country. When you take those bees to pollinate almonds, the only thing that they have to eat is almond pollen, almond nectar. In addition to that, you have a big problem because the people that cultivate the almonds have to take care of the almonds, and they use insecticides, fungicides fertilizers, water, and so on and so forth. And in the 90s, we have these new insecticides that are called neonicotinoids. They are extremely effective because those are systemic poisons. Systemic means that they go into the plant. And if they go into the plant, they are expressed in the pollen and nectar that is the food that bees eat. They will bring that food into the colony, and eventually the concentration gets to a point that it causes a damage in the brain of the bee. And they forget basically where they live. So they go to work and they never return. And this phenomenon appeared in 2006, and it is called colony collapse disorder. And that colony collapse disorder is not only due to neonicotinoids and insecticides. It has to do with small hive beetles, it has to do with varroa mites, it has to do with all the diseases that bees have, it has to do with the monodiet that they have, it has to do with the artificial diet that we provide to the bees. So it is a series of factors that will add up. At this moment, as we talk, we are losing out 45% of the bees, Apis mellifera bees, and whatever happens to Apis mellifera happens to the 4,000 species of bees that we have in the country.
That are native.
And that is actually damaging the food security that we have. That's very important for us to get conscious and do something to prevent the collapse of pollinators, because our next pandemic is going to be hunger. And it is going to be hunger because we are not going to have a healthy population of pollinators.
Okay, so thank you. That's a brief introduction to some of the things that we're doing. That was our bee yard on campus. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-founder of this Honeybee Initiative project, Germán Perea, who is going to talk to us a little bit about one of our international projects, and that's the one in Colombia. So go for it, Germán.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, all. Thank you for the invitation. I'm going to share the screen here, and I'm going to present to you this little PowerPoint that explains what we do in Colombia. Colombia is located in South America. We work in Santander, so you see over there, and this is most of the region that we work. At this moment, we have 12 municipalities there. Socorro is the place where the headquarters are located, and everything radiates from there. As Lisa said, our navigation map is the Sustainable Development Goals of United Nations. We try to apply as many as possible on all the activities we do. Another thing that is extremely important is the tripartite alliances. And that is the local governments, the private industry, and the communities. And we go from the bottom up, and basically we have a program in the United States, we have a program in Colombia, and we have a program in Peru. And everything is based on tripartite alliances. One example of that is something that we achieved this year. Actually, in September 11, we were able to get a donation official from the government. So the CAS is the institution that works with the natural resources in Colombia, and all the confiscated timber in Santander was donated to the foundation, and we can make that into hives for the communities. This is the growth that we have since 2017, where the program officially began. So we started with 20 families. At this moment, we have 219. We began with 3 municipalities. We have 12 at this moment. We began with 40 hives of apis. Now we have about 100, I can't see the figure over there, but that's about 150 something on apis and about 200 of melliponas. The melliponas program, since those are stingless bees, we use to empower women. We used to create programs for the schools. It is very important that the kids grow knowing sustainability, and they don't migrate to the cities. As you can see, the university has taken students over there. That's the mellipona bees that are called trigonas that we use in those particular areas in Colombia. The apis program, when I say apis, I mean the Africanized bees. It's open for everyone. So the program actually has a carpentry, and now we are autonomous in building all the equipment that we require. Anyone can participate in that program. And one of the most important things that we want is empower the community by developing social entrepreneurship. So at this moment, we have a factory that actually specializes on producing beeswax foundation, and we have also the carpentry. Our program focuses in women empowerment, children education, innovation education, financial education, food security, community empowerment, sustainability, poverty alleviation, environmental improvement, and social entrepreneurship. So that's more or less an overview of what we do in Colombia. I finished. If you have questions.
Do you want to stop sharing for just a second? And then I think
How do I do that?
right at the top of the screen, does it say here? I think I can. Did that work? Stop share. There we go. Oh, nope. Nope. There we go. There we're back. All right, John, I sent you a little chat. What is your verdict?
Oh, my apologies, on mute. So, no, absolutely. If we're okay with moving ahead, we've got about 20 minutes to the hour. So, Lisa, I think let's go ahead. It's fine.
Let's go ahead then.
Yeah.
So next, because we can't take you with us to Colombia, we want to, the bank that has supported our work, BBVA, or it looks like BBVA, is the bank that supported us. And they think that this is such an incredible example of social impact that they created a video when we came with our students to Colombia. So we're just going to share that. And I also want to share that because of Germán's leadership, we were selected as the 15th overall prize for social impact by the Latin American Green Awards last year. So it's pretty exciting. And so take it away, John.
Un grupo de estudiantes y 2 docentes de diferentes países llegaron a Santander para conocer los proyectos apícolas de Bees for Peace, que con el liderazgo y aporte financiero de BBVA y el apoyo técnico de la Universidad Industrial de Santander se están implementando. Y es que en la zona rural de los municipios de la provincia comunera, que integran Socorro, Confines y Palmas de Socorro tradicionalmente, las abejas son las que marcan la economía regional. Por eso desde Virginia, Estados Unidos, donde está ubicada la Universidad George Mason, de donde es este grupo, llegaron a una de las fincas de la región y entre el humo que se usa para calmar a las abejas y con la indumentaria apropiada, conocieron las colmenas de las apis, o mejor conocidas como africanizadas. Y a pesar de su escaso español, improvisaron un saludo durante la presentación del proyecto.
Nosotros llamamos a nuestra Universidad Mason. Gracias por su hospitalidad. Nos sentimos honrados de estar hoy con ustedes.
Por eso el director del programa, Germán Perilla, un biólogo colombiano especialista en abejas y docente de esta institución, explica el objetivo de la iniciativa.
Tiene 2 aspectos importantes. Uno es el empoderamiento de las comunidades y especialmente de la mujer. Es absolutamente primordial que eso ocurra. Y la otra parte es la sostenibilidad del proyecto desde el punto de vista apícola y desde el punto de vista económico. Es crear empresa, pero crear empresa desde un punto o desde un aspecto puramente social.
Durante la clase magistral que se realizó en la vereda La Cumbre, los estudiantes conocieron en detalle las colmenas y saborearon sus frutos. Por eso su balance del viaje es el mejor.
Bueno, mis expectativas antes del viaje eran conocer la región y ver cómo podíamos vincularnos con la Universidad de la UIS la comunidad y pues lógicamente con el BBVA para crear una relación. No nos imaginamos, no me imaginé que íbamos a ver tanto y a conocer tanto. El programa hasta el momento ha sido de nuestro agrado, ha sobrepasado nuestras expectativas.
Y porque han visto que en Colombia estos proyectos permiten a la mujer empoderarse.
La primera colmena se montó el 15 de agosto del año 2017, la segunda se montó el 13 de octubre del 2017 y la tercera se montó el 16 de diciembre del año 2017. Actualmente las 3 colmenas están en desarrollo, van en segunda cámara de alza y se mantienen en proceso.
Y en el caso del Socorro, unir a sus órganos de gobierno y sector privado con la academia.
Un proyecto donde se articulan tal vez yo creo que por primera vez en el Socorro una entidad bancaria, una entidad universitaria nacional y pública, una entidad universitaria pública internacional como es la George Mason University y de igual manera 3 municipios que estamos siendo beneficiados.
La comunidad es algo muy importante para todos en las instituciones que nosotros tenemos en estos momentos ejerciendo el liderazgo de ellas en el municipio del Socorro, en el municipio de Palmas del Socorro, en el municipio de Confines. Por esto, apoyar este importante sector apícola de la región se va a convertir en uno de los escenarios alternativos de desarrollo, no solo para los municipios que hemos comentado, sino también para la región, para el departamento y para nuestro país.
Okay, and I see that there are some questions in the chat, but John and I have made the executive decision that we're going to show one tiny more like little video because again, we didn't trust the technology. And so rather than try to link with Zeni, who's in Colombia, who's one of our participants in the Columbia project, we decided that we were going to have her do a video, which she's done here. So here we go.
George Mason en la Universidad La UIA. ¿En qué ha cambiado el proyecto en mi vida? En la importancia que han tenido la apicultura y las abejas para mí, para mi familia, en el nuevo aprendizaje que he obtenido. ¿En qué ha cambiado el proyecto en la forma económica? Bueno, primero es una caja menor que manejamos y gracias a ellos pues nos hemos podido mantener. Eso quiere decir que genera mejores ingresos, el aprendizaje es único. ¿Cuántas colmenas tengo actualmente? Actualmente cuento con 20 colmenas de apis y 8 de meliponicultura. ¿Cuánto miel produzco? De apis produzco 30 kilos por colmena al año. De cera, la cera que nosotros producimos se la cambiamos a la fundación, al proyecto y ellos nos lo vuelven en láminas de cera, las cuales se vuelven a utilizar pues para el mismo apiario. Nosotros no vendemos la cera. Otros productos que he aprendido con el proyecto es la producción de propóleo, que fue gracias a un curso que nos brindó el proyecto y el cual nos especializamos. ¿Qué ha significado para mí la agricultura y la meliponicultura? La apicultura ha significado el conocimiento, la importancia, el implementar nuevos cultivos forestales, los cuales ayudan o aportan flores para la supervivencia de la apicultura y la meliponicultura. La experiencia más importante que yo tuve en Estados Unidos fue el intercambio de culturas. Eso fue como muy impresionante para mí. ¿Por qué fue tan importante? Porque gracias a ellos pueden cumplir con su cadena productiva, con todos los parámetros. Nosotros solamente nos quedamos en producir y no cumplimos esa cadena productiva que ellos sí la tienen. ¿Y qué me dejó la visita de Estados Unidos? Una gran oportunidad, una gran visión de que uno puede cambiar, puede mejorar, puede tener nuevos productos, siempre que usted se mejore, se capacite, las industrias, las fábricas, todo eso fue un aprendizaje.
Okay, so that was Sunny, and we received a 100,000 Strong in the Americas grant to do a cultural exchange to bring her and a few others over, and then to bring our students over to Colombia. So there's a lot of questions in the chat, I think, but I know Travis asked how it started, and how it started was really that I met Herman one day and I discovered that he was a beekeeper and I thought bees were pretty cool. We hatched this plan to create a honeybee field station to focus on urban beekeeping. And then it kind of blossomed. We did a crowdfunding campaign. We started meeting colleagues all over the university. It's become a signature program for the university. Herman, do you want to add anything to that?
We are working very hard to make this possible, not only in the United States, but in the countries that we work. So Mason has been absolutely essential in the supporting that we have to make this a success.
And in turn, it's been a tremendous, opportunity for the university. We've really drawn a lot of attention to the university through this project.
And I don't know if there's any other questions, John, or do you want to go into breakout rooms or?
What I want to suggest, and thank you so much for sharing that, because it's, for me, just personally, it's so profound to see someone say, that we now think about the food for the bees. And think about, kind of what we plant as, in the context of, is it going to promote the health of those who pollinate our food. What I want to suggest, Lisa and Anne, and I'm just going to check with you as well in terms of time, is, obviously, one of the things we'd like to people to consider at this point is how you think about impact and global impact in your own context. What activities you undertake, how might we partner across the Deans and Directors Cohort to grow the impact of programs like this. So maybe we can, if it's okay, Anne, because I know we've got some folks waiting from Bailey's as well, if we maybe just take a few minutes and just hear whether there are any emergent thoughts around that. And if there aren't any, if there's no discussion around this now, then we can hold on to this and continue the conversation in the final hour of today's meeting. But I at least want to make sure that we share the questions that we're suggesting.
I think that's okay if we take a few minutes. Arvine, Stacy, Becky, do any of you have hard stops at 10:15?
Not for me.
No, I just have a 10:30 hard stop, that's all.
No problem here.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a few minutes then.
Thanks so much. So then we've got a few more minutes and some time to maybe ask some questions from Lisa and Herman about the initiative, about its impact, but also maybe in terms of the learning experience in the room, to share some of what you're doing and your thoughts on creating global impact through such initiatives.
And I'd love to add one thing before we do that, which is we are, in talking, I think it came up in the discussion yesterday around student projects, and we're going to come back to it later. But and with this one in particular, we're always interested in talking to potential partners, especially, those of you in other countries, if you would like to partner with us on a project like this and help us spread this to additional communities, additional parts of the world, we would love to have that conversation. We're always interested in our goal would be to really make this a worldwide phenomenon.
And actually, I want to add something here that I think is really important, and it's something that we work with our students on, and it's something that you're going to hear in this next project. I am not Colombian, I am not Latina, and I think that's probably obvious to many of you who know me. So we don't go into communities and say, this is what we're going to do. Those communities came to us. Herman is from Santander, and so of the community and part of the community, and all of these projects that we are talking about today are driven by the community. That is sometimes a source of frustration for our students who want to bring all sorts of new ideas and revelations to the people that they meet in these countries. But I do emphasize that, I don't know why something's happening here, but I do emphasize that it's driven by the community.
Travis, you're just on mute.
Yeah, I reached for it, but it didn't activate. So not a question, more of a comment. I think it's somebody said, how we walk the talk. I think that's a great thing, and it's something I'll just say personally. We at CSU in the College of Business, we've been thinking, how do we have a tangible project or something tangible like this? So I really like that it's a visible thing, not only in the education that you're doing, are you weaving in sustainability efforts, but you're also, doing something, an activity that ties into that as well. So just sort of a kudos to what you're doing there.
Yeah, and a question, maybe a follow-up. Could you explain how you engage? First, really so inspirational, and solidarity with the community and the respect that it is generated from the community and not from the outside. Really want to honor that. Could you explain how students are involved? Is this co-curricular? Is it through a program? Is it curricular? Just what's the mechanisms of your student connection to this?
You want me to answer, Herman? Okay. So yeah, it's all of the above. It's curricular. So we've woven demonstrations. Herman has visited so many of our introductory business classes, and so they make it part of talking about sustainable business. It's curricular in the sense that we have our College of Science colleagues bring their students to the hives. We have our educators bring their students to the hives to learn about pollinator lessons that they then go out and teach in classrooms in the area. So it's integrated into things like that. The trip that we took with the students was an embedded global option, and we were beneficiaries of money from the university to help ease the cost. Because if you recall from yesterday, our students do not have money to do these types of things. And so we're always seeking funding to do that. Herman teaches a class on beekeeping in the College of Science. So a lot of it is curricular. There's also a lot of co-curricular opportunities as well. So like we work with the sustainability clubs on campus, and they are helping us to maintain the pollinator garden beds around the apiary. The university will not do that because apparently bees are considered a dangerous animal. So we're responsible for that. So there's a lot of co-curricular opportunities as well.
Just looking around the room if there's anyone who's something else to add.
Yeah, just a reflection on it, because through GRLI we have lots of schools that do have exchange around the globe actually, and have student groups going around. And you of course you know all about that, and some of it compulsory and some of it more electives and more. But anyway, I wonder where we're going with this, with the pandemic, because it's really changed. Because before that, it was much more than being a part of the curricula. It was also a thorough cultural experience. It was a thorough sort of growth when it comes to the individual, personal, and also learning about the globe as such. I wonder where we're at right now when we're looking post-pandemic, because hopefully it will become epidemic eventually, where we're going with all of the things that were so thoroughly transformative to many before COVID-19. And it's symptomatic that we're looking at pictures from 2017. We're going back in time to see how students really experience, and the community in Colombia, where the cultural interchange, where she really mentioned the experience of meeting with, or having a meeting with the US culture. It's just a reflection on all of these things that are so fundamentally important from a SDG point of view holistically, but also from the now generation and going forward with a world that is integrated to the extent and inclusive to the extent that we can feel hopeful.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Anders, for that reflection. And I think we can certainly continue holding the questions about global impact and what our respective organizations are doing. I'll just maybe from my side say my observation of this is this looks like practical hands-on regeneration in action, because this is a very visible initiative. So I'm going to, just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask us to move along. I'm going to hand over to Anne. Thank you very much. Thank you, Herman, and of course, Lisa, for sharing with us this wonderful Honeybee initiative. I think there are some more videos as well, and I will circulate the links along with a number of other things after the cohort gathering is completed, so that anyone can connect with you, Lisa and Herman, to learn more and maybe support this or grow it in other parts of the world. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, and thanks, Herman.
Thank you, Herman.
I say thank you very much to all, and I'm leaving now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Herman. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you all. So first, I just want to thank you all for your openness to and respect for our guests that we've invited yesterday with the students and Herman, and now our next set of guests. Our Business for a Better World Center has a 5-part mission, and things that wouldn't surprise you, right? Educating, generating new knowledge, convening like we're doing here today, really being leaders in this movement that we're all part of to change business education. But a really important one to us is that one really important pillar of our mission is effecting change, right? We really want to be not just talking about change, but on the ground making change. And certainly you've seen that in the HBI project. And then another project that we're really excited about, it's a much newer project for us. So we're really kind of sharing it with you in its nascent stage, but it's a tripartite relationship that we have with Kaiser Permanente Community Health, which is a large, Kaiser Permanente is a large healthcare system in the United States, and community health is the branch that's focused on health equity. A community partnership, so a set of community partners, I believe 15 different community organizations from this community that are working with us, and then Mason as a third partner. And within Mason, it's even a partnership between us and the center and the business school, and our College of Health and Human Services, and a clinic there, the Mason and Partners Clinic, which is run by our colleague, Becky Sutter, who's here with us today, which serves, it's a free clinic that serves largely immigrant and refugee communities, both in Bailey's Culmore and in Manassas, which is another community near us. So we have 3 people here today who are going to be sharing with you kind of a little bit about the community and the role of each of these partners in the group. So as I mentioned, Becky Sutter from our Mason and Partners Clinic, Stacy Picard, who is one of the leaders of the Community Partner Coalition, and she's also the Assistant Social Services Director at the Darul Hijra Islamic Center. Then Parveen Burchik, who's our program manager, senior program manager from Kaiser Permanente. So basically what we're going to do is Stacy's going to give you a little bit of an overview of Bailey's Culmore, and then Parveen will jump in and talk a little bit about Kaiser Permanente's strategy for these kind of place-based initiatives. We are not the first, so they have a couple others that are a little more developed than ours, a little more senior. And then Becky will talk about Mason's role in all of this, and then Stacy will jump back in again and share with you about the community partnership. And if there's any time at the end, I'll share a little bit about one of the subcommittees and sort of the work that's happening there, but we'll sort of have to see how time goes on this. So Stacy, you want to jump in?
Sure, thanks, Anne. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for having us with you today and your interest in this work. When we're referring to the Culmore area of Bailey's Crossroads, we're referring to a population of just over 42,000, primarily in 2 zip codes, 22041 and 22044 in Falls Church, Virginia, which is just outside the immediate DC metro area. In a Northern Virginia Health Foundation report, this area, the Culmore area, was described as a quote unquote island of disadvantage in Northern Virginia. And just let me share this short excerpt from that report. The Culmore area of Bailey's Crossroads is only blocks away from the affluent Lake Barcroft neighborhood, yet it is among the region's most disadvantaged community. communities. No other census tract in the region ranked poorly on so many measures of disadvantage. 1/3 of children live in poverty. Only 14% of adults have completed college. Few people own homes. 30% of renters spend more than half their income on rent, and more than half of residents lack health insurance. So there's a great need in this area. And an important point I want to make about it is that Culmore is one of the, and Anne mentioned this as well, is one of the largest and most diverse immigrant communities in the nation. I'm with an Islamic center that serves a community of Muslims from over 50 countries around the world, but we also serve large surrounding communities of Vietnamese and Central Americans. So many of these issues having to do with new immigrants, many of these issues have to do with new immigrants resettling their lives here and the unique barriers that they face, especially regarding secure employment. So for example, many are educated, highly skilled professionals in their own countries, but those credentials don't easily transfer to the US. So they end up working in low hourly wage jobs. And because ours is a very expensive place to live, they have to work a lot of hours just for basic survival. And they end up trapped in these jobs. So I think that that's an element that makes this particular PBI a little bit different from other Kaiser investments, other PBI projects, where the issues tend to be born more of generational poverty.
Parveen, would you like to talk now about Kaiser Permanente? And
sure. For some reason, the slide is not advancing on my screen.
That's on me.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Parveen Burchik. I'm an interim senior program manager for Kaiser Permanente Community Health. And just for some background on Kaiser Permanente, we are a leading healthcare provider and a not-for-profit health system here in the United States. And since 1945, we've been committed to providing high quality, affordable care, not only to our members, but also really being intentional about how we show up in the communities that we serve. And so we are currently in 8 states, as well as the District of Columbia, and serve over 12 million Kaiser members, which are essentially our patients. And I'm with the community health team. And as Anne mentioned earlier, we are focused on improving conditions for health and equity in communities by addressing root causes, such as economic opportunity, affordable housing, safe and supportive schools, as well as a healthy built environment. And these efforts are done in collaboration with our communities and with our community partners and anchor institutions such as George Mason University. The slide that you'll see here is sort of our case for place-based health, and you'll see the trajectory over the years of the investments that Kaiser Permanente has made. But essentially, these place-based models and place-based health models allow us to leverage our assets across all geographies and boundaries, and are an opportunity for Kaiser to partner with community to co-design solutions to really address root causes that are impacting the health of our communities. So you'll see in 1967, we started in Los Angeles, California. This place-based initiative started 2 years after the Watts riots that were in 1965. It was, for those that maybe are not as familiar, the riots started as a result of an African-American man being pulled over for drunk driving. There was police brutality and several days of uprising in that community. So in response to that community need, really looking at sort of the education and family supports that were needed, the mental and behavioral health resources that were needed, Kaiser Permanente developed the Watts Counseling and Learning Center, and it still stands today, 50 some years later after its inception, and serves more than 5,000 residents annually from that Watts community. Here in Mid-Atlantic, which is where I'm based, our first effort at place-based health was in the Port Towns in Maryland. It's a conglomerate of 3 cities that are called the Port Towns. And this was really focused on healthy eating and active living. We knew this community was really facing issues with chronic diabetes, obesity. And so we worked in partnership with the community to develop community gardens, programming and safe spaces for children and families to have, activities, recreational activities. And then in 2016 in Baltimore, this was also in response to the uprising in Southwest Baltimore and the death of Freddie Gray while he was in police custody. So in response to that, Kaiser Permanente developed our Future Baltimore initiative, which is focused in West Baltimore in the 21223 zip code. And so we've partnered with Bon Secours Health System, which is another health entity here in the region, has really deep roots in the greater Baltimore area. And as Stacy mentioned, some of these communities that we've worked in, the issue is really generational poverty and really the lack of opportunities for economic advancement. And so our focus there is really on job training and education programs, as well as mental health resources. In partnership with Bon Secours, we are developing a community resource center, and that will hopefully open in spring of 2022, but that will sort of co-locate different social health resources for the community. There is a very large gym that is going in that'll be well equipped to provide youth, a safe place to gather and to have recreation opportunities as well. And then the last effort in Maryland is in Riverdale, Maryland, and Greater Riverdale. It's our third place-based initiative in Maryland, and this one is really focused on building capacity of a community that is in transition due to the Purple Line corridor. So as our public transit systems have expanded, we know there's going to be an impact in terms of affordable housing opportunities for the folks that live in and around this Purple Line corridor. So the efforts for that place-based initiative are really around affordable housing, doing a lot of policy advocacy support there, also partnering with the faith-based community to leverage their acreage that many of them have to develop permanent affordable housing units for the community. And we're also doing a lot of work with the schools in Prince George's County, which directly is tied to that place-based initiative. And then our newest, and why we're here today, is our effort in Bailey's Crossroads in Culmore, Virginia. And for the reasons that Stacy laid out, as we were looking for the right location to launch a place-based initiative in Northern Virginia, Bailey's Culmore, just given that it ranked so poorly on all of those measures that were sort of designated them in this Islands of Disadvantaged report, is why we selected Bailey's Culmore. And so we have met with the community several times in partnership with George Mason and in partnership with an organization called CASA to do some community visioning charrettes to hear from the community firsthand what their needs are. And largely the issues that our coalition and our subcommittees are organized around are the ones that have sort of bubbled to the top, with access to care really being at the top. And with Kaiser being a healthcare organization, there's a really nice fit there, and there are levers that we can pull as an organization. We also know that Mason brings a lot to the table with the Mason and Partners Clinic and just the deep history that the clinic has working in this community for over 20 plus years. So here you'll see some of the efforts that we've had over the last few years. The visioning charrettes, Kaiser Permanente offers a no-cost insurance coverage program to those who don't qualify for any other public or private insurance. So it's largely the undocumented population. So we were able to work with partners such as Dar al-Hijra to offer enrollment into that program. We also did some sponsorships in the community just to get Kaiser's name out there and to create the visibility and trust in a community where there's often mistrust of organizations sort of coming in new. And right as we sort of were gaining some traction and we're launching, the pandemic hit. So we've sort of had to pivot how we're working with community and how we're supporting community. So for the most part of 2020, our strategies were focused on COVID-19 relief and support to our community, sort of those direct services, supporting food distribution and food access, as well as vaccination efforts in the community. And in 2020 is also when we selected George Mason University as our anchor partner for this initiative. Again, looking at all of the resources that the university brings to the table in partnership with Kaiser Permanente. So it's not only the Mason and Partners Clinic, but it's looking at the expertise and the brain power that Business for a Better World can bring to this community, the different models that of entrepreneurship. We just heard about the Honeybee initiative, which is just fascinating. But if there are similar initiatives and programs that could potentially be lifted and placed into this community as well. And in 2021, so for the first 3 quarters of this year, we've worked to establish our coalition and select our co-chairs. Stacey Picard, who's with us today, is one of those co-chairs. And we've also launched our Mid-Atlantic Community Network. And so this is an enterprise-wide effort for Kaiser Permanente in partnership with an organization called Unite Us. And the goal is really to address social health through a technology platform. So if a member or a person presented in a clinic with a food insecurity need, a case manager at that clinic could go online and make a referral to a food pantry and really follow the life cycle of that referral, whether services were provided. If not, we can reroute to another organization. So we've provided this tool and resource at no cost to the community. So Kaiser Permanente, along with other funders, are at the table really to provide that backbone and infrastructure in terms of the funding that goes behind this network. We've continued to offer programming around our health insurance coverage. And we've also engaged or re-engaged with the county. Fairfax County, Virginia has an opportunity neighborhoods effort, which is also in Culmore. So we are working with them to really find those points of alignment and how we can work more collaboratively together.
That's great, Parveen, thanks. And if we can have Becky now is going to jump in and talk a little bit about Mason and what we're doing in our role as partners.
Yeah, it's exciting to be able to be a university that's the anchor is a partner for Kaiser Permanente. I think that, Parveen, we're the first university that's the anchor partnership, certainly in our East Coast side. And so for us, it's always about, the next generation and how we can actually train better. I mean, that's a university philosophy that, we really embrace here with both of our centers, both the Mason and Partners Clinic and the Business for a Better World, believe that we can provide good, but we also can train the next generation to do better than what we have been able to do as well. So know better, do better model. And so Mason Partners has been a partner in the Culmore area for both direct provision of healthcare services and as well as the indirect, which is around the strategy of connectivity and really looking more at collaborative impact and how we can all leverage all of our resources together. And like Parveen has said, we've been in the community for over 20 years in doing this work and certainly feel like we're embedded there and have a deep-rooted programs in there. So when the opportunity came to have Business for a Better World be part of this conversation, we knew that it was the right thing to do. And then again, that even within the university itself, that we were better together and that we can really address things, not just at a direct site, but also looking at how we can improve the infrastructure of that community together. So there's 5 targeted areas that we are really working on in this early phase of this place-based work. What we know is that place-based work takes thoughtfulness, intentionality, and certainly a long-term commitment to the communities that we serve. And so we are the Mid-Atlantic, the Unite Us champion for Northern Virginia, and excited to figure out how we can embed that within all of our organizations so that not just at an organizational perspective, they'll be able to use that information for individual care, but to connect us to each other and see what our own network of community is looking like and how to improve ourselves across all of that. Virtual communities of practice and platforms that allow for communication to occur and shared information, shared data, shared documentations really will allow us to move farther, faster together. So we're working really hard to figure out what that looks like. That will probably be in the later half of what the work that we'll do as we're just now teaming and figuring out ourselves to figure out what will be responded to in this community at both an organizational and a community individual level. We certainly believe that impact pledges or those that are dedicated to giving the needed resources, both monetarily and non-monetarily, time and investment is important for sustained change. And so really working to figure out how Kaiser can also partner with others so that they can actually go further as well. And then we certainly believe, as we've been part of this work, that we can bring from a university perspective and from just be knowledgeable of the area, that we can bring some strategy facilitation and some development of best practices into this area. Always from a university perspective, looking at and understanding that impact, it really is about the data that we can share and that we can actually kind of gather and talk about. And so we really, really are working hard to find the stories that have made the difference so that we can continue to share that more broadly. So my best visual that I think is here is where it says community resilience, because they are right in the middle. They will drive how they respond. Both, we as organizations can be at the table, but ultimately it's about how each individual member of the community responds to us, both at organizational and collectively. So there's social resilience, environmental resilience, and certainly economic resilience that we need to pay attention to, especially post-pandemic in the world that we are now. And we have a prime opportunity to do some equity and some strong equity conversations and some work around here. So excited to be, really embedded within this amazing opportunity.
Thanks, Becky. And so, the reason is here really to help facilitate and to provide support to the community, but ultimately the work will be happening in the community. And a key element of that is the community partners. And so Stacy's now going to share with us about the Community Partner Coalition and the work that they're doing in the space.
Yeah, as Parveen mentioned, the PBI in Culmore began with a meeting of 15 longtime direct service providers in the community. And Kaiser doesn't have a cookie cutter model for these initiatives. Their model is to learn about the existing assets in the community and invest in building upon those assets. So while most communities have service providers in one form or another, ours is a mature and highly collaborative network. We meet once a month and easily share referrals and support. So this was one of the community assets. As she mentioned as well, resident voices were also captured early on with a process of the charrettes, focus groups, interviews conducted by CASA, which is one of the trusted providers in the Latinx community, and Opportunity Neighborhoods, which is actually the county, Fairfax County structure for community organizing in neighborhoods that are deemed these islands of disadvantage, which I described earlier. So you'll see in the list of providers here that were initially gathered and are now part of the coalition, that there are faith organizations, health organizations, legal organizations, and those that serve youth and families, even Fairfax County government, who's been at the table as a willing collaborator. Fairfax County is consistently one of the wealthiest and well-resourced counties in the United States. And they have an intentional framework for addressing the types of inequities that exist in Culmore. Also, where many faith organizations are just that, they're places of worship. The ones in this list are true servants of the community that offer basic needs assistance, such as food distribution, community health outreach, and more. And they're often almost always trusted first stops for residents in need, even if they are ultimately navigated to another resource. At the beginning of this year, the coalition members formed committees or work groups around each of the areas of need that surfaced in the earlier focus groups and interviews, and that overlapped with those social determinants of health that Kaiser focuses on, which are affordable housing, secure employment, access to healthcare, infrastructure, and youth and family supports. You can see justice and advocacy is in the center on this slide, and it was initially another committee, but early on in meetings, we realized that this is an important element of every committee's work. So we disbanded it as a committee, and instead we said, we need to view each committee's work through the lens of justice and advocacy to see where structural barriers are that can be addressed, as Becky referred to. We often say that our mission is to put ourselves out of business. If we can look upstream to the policies and the structures that create these inequities rather than just responding to the consequences, then we're truly making an impact.
Thanks, Stacy. And I'm just going to very briefly give some examples of some of the work that's happening in one of these committees, which is the Economic Empowerment Committee. One of the things that came out of the early data gathering from the community members was that economic opportunity was a real concern, a real issue for people. One of the very first things that we're doing in this committee is actually looking to build out sort of an archive of economic stories. So we're about to engage in structured interviewing of community members, taking advantage of the opportunity to partner with organizations like Stacy's and some of the other organizations, for instance, the Columbia Church, to be able to go when they are providing other services and start to talk to community members who are there waiting, and to do these structured interviews to really learn their stories about their economic units, about how they're supporting themselves, about where they see opportunity, where they see barriers, so that we can make sure that as we start to develop or invest in the programs that currently exist or develop new programs, that we're actually addressing the specific issues that the community is facing. So that's an important piece of what we're doing right now. Also engaged in some asset mapping, right? So looking at all the organizations within the community partnership and the kinds of services that are being provided, but also more broadly to other organizations that are working in the community, so that we don't start filling gaps that don't really exist, right? Because we know there are assets out there, or identifying where the gaps are. Some of the things that we are beginning to think about structuring, assuming that we get consistent, that these ideas are validated through the community stories, is a training to jobs program. So not just a jobs training program without a job at the other end of it, but actually partnering with companies. We have a lot of really big companies in Northern Virginia: Amazon, Google, Hilton, Marriott, Nestle, right? All have homes here, Capital One. So looking at partnering with them to identify jobs that people could be trained for and move into. There's a large population of undocumented immigrants who are day laborers, and providing a resource center, so they're not standing outside the 7-Eleven waiting to pick up work for the day, but actually have a resource center, a place to be, a place where people could come when they're looking for work. And then also through Business for a Better World in particular, launching a social incubator in this space, right? This community is very interesting, as was referenced earlier. It's a combination of people who are highly educated, highly trained, but can't work in their profession in the United States. It's people who are unskilled, who are illiterate, who may speak no English, may be illiterate in both their own language and in English, but people also who are documented, people who have an immigration status that allows them to work, people who do not have. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all solution here. As our students sort of challenged us yesterday to think about, right? And so how do we, and so one option for many of the people in these communities may not be working for someone else, because they're not legally able to work. It may be building a business of their own. And so the idea of a social incubator to come in with funding to provide resources and support people in building their own businesses, if that's the path that they want to take, or that makes the most sense for them. So again, these are just some examples of the things that we're working on. If we meet again in a year, hopefully we'll have more to tell you and concrete examples of how it's going. But this is the direction we're going, just in this one committee. So. Thank you. I think that's the end of what we have. I don't know in the schedule if there's any time for questions. I'll turn that to you, John, to tell us where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a little bit behind schedule, but I don't think that matters, because it's wonderful to have these inputs. We can do one of two things. We can take maybe a 10-minute small group discussion in case people would like to deepen their connection to what's just been said, or we can keep it in the room here. Maybe just hear some questions from everyone who's been listening with interest. I'm veering to the latter. Maybe we can just get an indication of, okay. So let's keep it in the room whilst we still have Stacey and Rebecca, and let me see, is Parveen still on the call? As she had to dial off. Oh, Parveen's still there. Sorry, I just don't have everyone on screen. So whilst we have you in the room still for a bit, maybe we can just open for some comments and suggestions. I'll put our suggested conversation or reflection points in the chat for those of you who want to just kind of take note of what we suggest we deepen in this conversation.
And I would just like to thank Stacey and Parveen and Becky for being here. I forgot to do that at the end.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Hey.
This is like teaching when you ask a question and everybody stares at their screens.
I have a quick question. I'm a former healthcare executive with St. Joseph Health on the West Coast, which is also a nonprofit. And I know that the community benefit structure and the nonprofit structure of healthcare is a dimension perhaps of the way in which you build platforms for engagement. And also wondering, I'm struck by the fact that George Mason has a School of Nursing, and I'm wondering how significant that is in the collaboration between business school and the School of Nursing and the community benefit work. And is there opportunities or possibilities for universities that don't have schools of nursing to build or participate in something comparable?
I guess I can take that. So one, yes, I think we're very fortunate that we do have a School of Nursing that can partner. And I think that this is our first collaboration with the Business for a Better World, but you can naturally see the fit, especially where we are now in our equity conversations about where we're going to move forward, that it just is the logical place for us to kind of be in moving forward and developing better community networks and better community programming for, not just direct healthcare, which we know is important, but certainly the social determinants and the other long-standing issues of communities. If we can't improve that, we can't improve access, and we can't improve overall health. I absolutely think that every university needs to be engaged with the communities. Universities are a wealth of information for next generation workforce, right? So, and what we do know is that if we train people in environments such as, communities of need, then they tend to give back over the lifetime of their own career to those same communities. Been proven over and over and over again. I would actually say, to go even further than that, Jeff, is that universities have an obligation to put students in communities of need so that they do have a dedicated long-term commitment to serving those that need us the most. I think that's a university equity conversation that should happen, and certainly about if they're going to be embedded in those communities, then they need to learn to give back. So whether it's nursing, again, I think I said in the presentation, we do have the opportunity to provide some really robust direct healthcare services. But again, it's not always about the direct provision of healthcare that matters, but it's a strategy around how to access the care. It's a strategy to take a look at what is available in each community and make those really meaningful connections that I think will make the difference.
Thank you.
To kind of build on that too, yeah, I mean, we were really lucky to have a relationship with Becky, and when KP and Becky were talking, that Becky pulled us into this as well. Mm-hmm. But I do think that one of the things that comes up again and again when you look at communities where there are these equity issues is there's usually an economic issue as well. It's rarely that we're seeing equity issues in wealthy neighborhoods, right? And so I feel like there's always a place for the business school, right? If we can take that lens of equity and opportunity, but it may be that we need to be the ones reaching out to local health, to the local, the Kaiser Permanentes and the St. Joseph's and, the healthcare companies that are out there doing this kind of work to say, hey, here's what we bring to the table. We'd like to partner with you. It just may be more on us to be the initiators.
And I just think universities, that bidirectional understanding of what's actually happening in the communities, we're going to make better thinkers, and we're going to make better, businesses. I mean, just with a deeper understanding of what needs to happen.
Yeah, engaging the students in it is really key.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And thanks, Becky. I know you need to run. You're past your 10:30.
Sorry, I love this kind of conversation. So I'm sorry I have to leave, but thank you, everybody. I have to go teach. Bye.
I think this isn't a question as such, but it is an observation. So my background historically is as a social worker and also a lecturer in social work at one point, where we also had a healthcare actually in the university. But I have to say that we never spoke to each other. And in fact, if we could walk down the corridors and avoid each other, that would be really, really helpful. So I'm struck by and in awe, actually, of the amount of collaboration that you have undertaken in this, both internally and externally with Kaiser Permanente, with faith groups that are, although they, there is a common purpose, have very often different lenses in terms of how they look at similar things. So the level of communication and dialogue and connection that you must have made and relationship that you must have developed both internally in GMU and outside, just really, it strikes me, and I really want to acknowledge that. I think it's particularly awesome is a word I would use. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Just a thought, John. We have the dashboard for different activities that are present within the full community of GRLI. But I just wonder, when listening to these community initiatives, if there's a possibility of mapping the community initiatives that are compatible and possible to scale, because there's probably a lot of learning and partnerships that are possible that could be sort of pollinated throughout.
Thank you, Andres, for pollinating.
Yeah, I just wonder about that. Because there's so many details, ingredients, and things in what you just described and what you presented, that at least I feel, could be, with adjustments, et cetera, but we could learn from and could be taken into other contexts, and be supported by what you've experienced and what others have experienced in their own taking off on those initiatives. Just a thought.
And since you've mentioned my name, I'm going to have to respond. Sounds like a multi-layered challenge and opportunity, because just a reflection beyond this is that a number of actions that are coming out of the cohort, or perhaps somehow related to the cohort, are growing beyond the cohort's borders, which is exactly the intention. And it's starting to overlap with what the GRLI in the wider landscape is doing. So yes, I think there's certainly something that you need to think about that. Thanks, Anders. Any other thoughts arising, questions or inspiration to share, building on what we heard about Bailey's Culmore and Kaiser Permanente's initiative? Just looking around the room, because okay. So what we did do is I pasted in the chat as well. Just when you revisit or replay today's conversation, I think what we suggested in terms of reflection is what actions business schools can take in their own communities to create positive and sustained impact, and of course, as per this example, specifically to advance local and regional impact, of course, with the Honeybee Initiative being a wonderful example of kind of global impact. So also from my side and on behalf of the GRLI, to Parveen and Stacey and Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing this wonderful learning and this initiative, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Parveen. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
See you.
Wonderful. So I'm just quickly looking at Claire. Claire.
Always good. Always.
Yeah. Just looking at you, we're actually more or less on track now in terms of timing.
Okay.
So would the suggestion be that we maybe tee up our kind of closing question before we go into small groups?
Yeah, so one of the advantages of Zoom is that we can all be together, and one of the disadvantages of Zoom is that sometimes it kind of, in terms of sitting and being in a large group. So I think the suggestion, Lisa and John, is that let's pause again for a moment. We've heard some amazing contributions. Let's just pause and gather ourselves a little bit again before we move into holding more again of a plenary place where we can look at, okay, what does this mean for us? What does this mean in terms of any contributions, any collaborations, but also I think posing a question, Anne and Lisa, before we finish, about what might be a possible way forward. How can we take what we've learned over these days and perhaps shape our work with our institutions? Perhaps as a cohort, is there something that we can do together, as John suggested, beyond that which is already happening? And we have Wayne on the call, and the global program that's in development at the moment. So I think, John, I would suggest that's exactly what we do. Let's break into smaller groups and just have a chance to catch up and gather where we are.
So we'll have 2 groups of 4, 1 group of 5, but you have the option of moving around if you wish.
Well, we need a good big chunk of time just to bring this to a close, don't we? And think about what actions, if any, we can take forward. I mean, I would like to suggest 15, well, does 15 minutes sound okay? Yeah, those people who are not nodding, you've got to go with this now.
So we wait for the boot and then we...
Yes. You aren't going to cut us off this time. Say, John, before we go, our group had a question about when the next one of these was, because we're kind of longing for the days where we don't have to cram everything into 2.5 and 3 hours.
We'll get onto that now. And I'll make a note as well, just so that we don't. So we're going to kick off with any immediate thoughts or ideas that you'd like to share, including maybe any invitations or offers for further dialogue beyond the cohort. And we'll also get on to a quick update from Jeff.
I think I just want to share something at the risk, because I was saying is I feel like I'm guilty of doing exactly what I say is so frustrating sometimes when you're doing work like this. And that is that you put your best foot forward and you don't talk about the struggles and the challenges. And so I don't want anybody to think any of this was easy. You don't get tenure on the work that you do for this. You don't sometimes get recognized. There's a lot of failure involved. The Honeybee Initiative started out strong at Mason, but the college that we were in basically said we don't want it anymore. And so we almost lost the Honeybee Initiative at one point. The Kaiser Permanente grant came about, and we've had all sorts of challenges working with the community members. So it hasn't been, we put our best foot forward to show you what we've done, and we are very proud of all that we've accomplished. But it was also replete with bruises and stubbed toes and scabbed knees and things like that. I mean, it just is, and I suspect that it will continue to be that way. But I just think that's important, because I think sometimes we put our best foot forward and we don't always say, you know what, this is really hard and this is really challenging, and there's a bazillion obstacles that you have to overcome in order to make something like this successful.
And we're happy to talk about those offline if you want to know more about what hasn't gone well.
Well, I've got sound, and I know I'm just joining right at the end, but that's so refreshing to hear you say that, because I've been to so many talks over the last 12 months where business schools have said how wonderful they've reacted and it's just a great long list of the wonderful agility they demonstrated. And I go, that's fantastic. But really, as all the things we do, we learn much more from the things that the challenges and the failures and the bruised knees, like you said. So it's just refreshing to hear that, because I have to say I've turned off quite a few talks where somebody's told me how great their business school was at being agile and going online 24 hours after the lockdown, whereas saying that actually this is really hard, and we did this despite the dean or despite the rector, is nice to hear. And apologies for my terrible internet connection this afternoon.
Yeah, and to that point, I think one of the real strength of these projects is the partnerships, and the real headaches of these projects is the partnerships. I mean, that for me, that's where the struggles come in, is wrangling multiple organizations. You're trying to work together, establishing roles and responsibilities, not making it so rigid that nobody ever steps out of their lane and you end up not really cooperating. It's like you're working in parallel versus not being clear what your what your roles and responsibilities are, and stepping on people's toes and hurting people's feelings, or things falling through the crack because nobody knows that it's something that they're responsible for. So it is a constant struggle, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of conversations and phone calls with one partner or another partner, trying to get everybody on the same page.
So to compliment you, Anne, and everyone at Mason for those partnerships, I was with Cindy, Hannah, and Van, and we were talking about how much we had learned the past 2 days just by having these really fruitful examples of partnerships from the different initiatives that you're running, and how mission it was for GRLI to be featuring these sort of discussions about those kind of initiatives at your schools, and all of us are struggling in different ways to corral funding to sustain our initiatives, and we were thinking out loud actually about how to ask GRLI, John and Claire, to help us move from being a convener to also being a champion. And so, you know, we were really thinking about how at each of these meetings, you could have a sort of a feature, or on the website feature the beekeeping initiative, for example. We know it was bumps and bruises, but it had 5 logos on that slide. And that is really symbolic about the sort of partnerships we're trying to engender in this group. So it was just really active and fruitful discussion about how having some championing through GRLI will help us. I know it'll help me to say, hey, look, you're featured here, or, you know, look at the cool thing Mason is doing. It's a great example of how we can start to have more community involvement. Having those showcases to show to faculty, to trustees, and build on momentum would be helpful. We didn't know if there was a way you could do that, but it seemed to have a lot of energy in our conversation.
Yeah, maybe I can just briefly respond, because I think it kind of touches on what Anders said just before the break. There are individual, institutional, and now collective actions that are emerging that are demonstrating this shift of the GRLI, which was, you know, kind of traditionally, historically about calling for action, to now acting the call. And I think that's going to be a big theme for us next year. So how do we convene, amplify, and then demonstrate the impact that these initiatives create? So it's a wonderful idea. Thanks, Wendy, for that feedback also.
This is Van. I'd like to say thanks to Wendy for, you know, articulating. We really did have a very interesting conversation. And one other point is, these students from yesterday were extremely articulate. And what if we, rather than create a bunch of work for ourselves, what if we, you know, gave these students the opportunity to put together small, you know, vignettes showcasing what they were involved in, and in that way involve the student constituents in the whole GRLI, you know, cohort. I mean, some of the, being able to capture what those students were about, and in particular those 3 student impact initiatives, that'd really be wonderful.
Van, you just teed us up. I don't know. I mean, would now be an okay time, John? Because
very much so, yeah.
I mean, we did not pay Van to do this and to ask this question, but Anne, do you want to like describe what our proposal was going to be? Because
sure, yeah. I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I'll always talk more. We were just really thinking, again, going back to what I said yesterday about how hearing in these conversations and in the broader conversations at GRLI about bringing students more into the work and the student voice. And so, and the talk, as John, you know, just articulated around, and Wendy around us really being interested in moving more towards action. And so we started thinking about what could we as a cohort do, engaging students and in action. And so we started thinking about whether we could, as a group, put together some sort of, or facilitate students putting together some sort of global forum. You know, basically, you know, again, building on the fact that we're in the Zoom world, you know, it would be very expensive. Many of us couldn't afford to send students on an international trip to come together, but we can support them in doing something in a virtual format. And there are a lot of different ways we could do it. And one of the ways that we thought about, we just at Mason did a 17 rooms event. And I don't know if you were aware of the 17 rooms format. Does anybody know about this format? It has been instituted by the Brookings Institution, and they've been kind of facilitating at different places. But the idea is you create small groups, like working groups, around each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And the way we did it at Mason, we had a series of we formed our groups in the spring. We had a series of meetings over the summer, and then we came together for a one-day event where we, you know, and we had sort of shared in advance some of the work that was happening, and then we went to different rooms and looked for synergies. And the idea is to come together around one of the SDGs come up with 2 or 3 actionable items that this group is really committed to doing, and then look for sort of, synergies across the groups and how we can support each other across the different groups and across the different SDGs. But some way to engage students in thinking about these problems, giving them a structure, and helping them connect worldwide, with a network of other like-minded students, right? Students who are passionate about these same events, these same issues, and then thinking about how, of course, we could be working with them, to support the work that they want to do, and in the projects that would come from students versus coming from us for students. So a lot of different ways we could structure it, but that was kind of our idea. Is there some way that we could, pulling on, a set of students from each of our schools, we could make it broader to other schools if we wanted to, but then to organize, coordinate some sort of forum to bring them all together. And again, we have Oikos as a new board member, right, with the GRLI, who might be able to partner with us. So that's the idea. Always open to other ideas or tweaks on that.
Some nods. I see some nodding.
Great idea.
Great idea.
And it would have the possibility of being an ongoing.
Yes.
Right. So it could start small, think big, start small, act now. And then we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah.
That would be quite interesting.
Right.
I'd like to define it with it being kind of an annual event. I just think that, and depending on how we do it, if done well, then I think that there could be opportunities for these projects to be ongoing, right? Over, so what I'd like to see us avoid is sort of the one and done, right? If we can, because again, that's particularly for people who are engaged in community work, it isn't done. So you can't go in and say, here's the solution, and now we're going back to our regular scheduled lives, and you can deal with whatever you're dealing with, right? We can't do that, so.
Yeah.
And it could be that there are ideas that come out of it that are truly global programs, or there's something that we're doing that everybody's working together on, and there could be things where students identify projects that can happen locally, but where multiple students and their associated faculty or support are doing projects locally, but they again have this network of the same kinds of programs going on, so they still have this peer group, they have this place to come back to talk about their challenges, their successes, to get advice, because we're doing a whole series of projects about health and equity, or we're doing a whole series of projects around beekeeping or economic development, or whatever those things are. But to give, we always talk about this community, right? And how special it is to be part of this community and to see all of your faces and to know that you're all doing the work that we're doing. And I think that's just as important for the students, right? To know, that's what we kept hearing from our students, both, the internships, the impact fellows, the Wicked Problems Bootcamp, is that sense of community that they have, that cohort that they formed. And so can we build for students something like what we get out of GRLI?
Well, they love competitions as well. So, our most heavily, participated activities are case competitions that, are among various institutions. So it'd be kind of cool if we could structure competitions around this, impact initiatives for each of the 17 SDGs or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just going to say, and maybe this is a little bit of an update about the current status of the collaborative course that we're working on. There's 8 universities now that are committed to launching this pilot in the spring. But the process was that we first convened a group who'd be interested in figuring out how to work together. Then we came up with some kind of model that we used as kind of a straw person that we could react to see whether we could adapt it to make it fit. And another key piece of that was that we tried to structure it so that universities could connect in a way that would not kick off the normal kind of barriers. So one of the things we thought about was this being a course that each individual university offers, and we would think of our partner universities as guest speakers, so that everything is managed within the enrollment, the tuition structure, all of those kinds of things of our universities. So we don't have to figure out about the burdens of transferring funds between, you know, all that kind of stuff. But we put together a working group to figure out how we could try to launch this with as many opportunities and as few barriers as possible. And then another piece of that was how it could be adapted to be kind of right-sized or fit the individual universities. And, you know, where we're at now is we've got, like I said, eight members who are participating. We've each made proposals. We're designing modules within this globally responsible leadership for sustainable transformation course. We've each proposed content modules and with a pilot to launch in the spring. And we're now meeting to just work out the logistics about how we work together to deliver on that. But the reason I'm sharing that, Anne and Lisa, is just to say, if we could participate in the same kind of, wow, let's convene a group of people who'd be interested in this, and then just start, you know, building out a model of what this would look like and how we could connect.
Right.
That was a way that we were able to move from an idea to some kind of model of action.
Right. Yeah, you generate good ideas in a group of 28 or 30, but you don't get a lot done, right? It takes the smaller
Right, and
working groups to get the work done.
Yeah, and so we just stood up a model and react to this, and let's just start building toward that. And it's a pilot, and figure it out. And I don't know, Wayne, if you have anything you want to, you know, add or edit in terms of what I shared, but that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, it's just that we're getting to the stage where we're going to start making it happen. So it's exciting, but also challenging. So I think institutionally, at least I'm finding it's you have to keep reminding the institution that it's okay to experiment and possibly even to fail. And that's why the couching around this being a pilot and an experiment, and we will learn from it, is important, because the institutional default is let's, you know, study the market, study the risks, how we're going to make money out of this, how's it going to fit. It seems like it's very complex, So we just move ahead, and then once it succeeds, then we will have a big crowd around us saying how wonderful it was, this idea of theirs.
And we'll have plenty of bruised knees and bumps and bruises to share as well.
Sure.
And maybe just a reminder that as we discussed also in the context of the shared module, that when two or more GRLI partners collaborate on an initiative like this that serves the common good and that aligns to the guiding principles of the GRLI, then we can kind of endorse it as a gateway initiative of the GRLI. So, you know, Anne and Lisa, if you have energy for this, and it appears that there's some in the room that definitely have energy for this, maybe you'd like to convene a first conversation where we can go into this in more detail, maybe circulate something with the wider cohort, because I think, you know, once we put something out to everyone who can't be here today, we may find a few more takers as well. And again, as Anders said, you know, think big, start small, but act now. So we, you know, it could be a pilot, it could be something small, but just to kind of get that momentum going. So sorry for being so bold in saying that, but I think that's kind of the way, you know, the shared module's also been gaining momentum. Jeff and Wayne's been taking a lead, and we've you know, we had initially I think 6 schools and now 8 that are saying, oh gosh, you know, we should try this.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great model, you guys. You know, that's a great success story, along with the bruised, you know, the scraped knees and the bruises and bumps. But I've been impressed watching your progress on that.
Well, one thing, and maybe what I was thinking about when you're talking about this model of the 17 rooms, one thing that helped us is we stood up a proposal of this is how it could work. What do you think? And then people could react to see how that fit, etc. So that it took the conversation from wouldn't it be great if we could collaborate to here's a specific idea about how we are going to collaborate. And that helped us move from opportunity to kind of tactical planning. It's still with all of the issues that we're working through, but that was a helpful kind of linchpin. So when I was hearing you talk about that 17 rooms model, and there's a very specific structure that you're proposing, that might really help catalyze the conversation.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I mean, my interest has always been in undergraduate education, and so I was joining the first round of Wayne and Jeff, what you did, and I thought you guys handled it brilliantly. And I know one of our faculty members is interested in round 2 of this. So I just think how you handled it was great. And I'm volunteering you. Anne and I would be delighted to have such a conversation.
Yes.
And like, I don't know, like if people want to put their names in the chat, if they want us to contact them.
Well,
And then
Lisa, why don't we put something together and send it out to the group broadly, right? Because some people had to drop off today, some people who weren't able to make it at all. So make it a cohort
That's a
wide,
good
and then that way you'll have something to respond to.
That's a good idea.
And I've also put some more notes in the chat because I think there's certain positioning things that we can think of, about upfront. We know that, for instance, silos between the SDGs is a big challenge, that there are inherent contradictions in the SDGs, etc. So how can, in the kind of the very basic design of such an initiative, we actually address some of those concerns? Maybe some of you took part in the courageous conversation that we had a few weeks ago, where Lars and Frans kind of highlighted some of that, and I know Hannelene has also written about it on our blog. So I think we can put some of that in the mix and then maybe put something up. Wonderful. Any other, I'm just looking at the clock here, any other impressions or invites for further conversation and exploration beyond this meeting? I know we need to talk about upcoming meetings, but I think I'll do that just in the context also of our thank yous, etc. So maybe just before we move to anything else from the small group discussions, any other reflections about learning over the last 2 days that you'd like to share?
Just very quickly for me, John, it's just an acknowledgement of just I'm really thrilled by the conversation that we've just had, and the things that are happening, the moves to action. I think it's absolutely great, and I'm touched by the conversation on failure as well that Mark talked about. And there was a recent Royal Society of Arts convened a conversation about failure, and 3 people talked about what it had been like. 3 business people talked about an innovation that they did that went absolutely wrong. And it was an incredible experience to learning experience to hear about it. And I just wonder if at some point when we're in the room together, or at some opportunity there might be for us to, as agents of change, to gather something of that somewhere. So that's just a thought from me.
Just a few thoughts from my side as well, John. Is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely, Anders.
Which has about the hardship to do to some extent, but I believe that we're celebrating at GMU now with having managed fairly well through the pandemic. But it's been hard. It's been hard, and it's been different, and some original grounding ingredients of the Cohort has been challenged for sure. So now we're gearing up for 2022 because that's where we're heading, and I certainly do that. And I think we should, all of us, with hope of further strengthening our relational and reciprocal foundations, because that's what we stand firmly on. And we will devote December as information for you this year to a dialogue on how to advance with vigor in 2022. And John may want to say something more about that.
Yeah, so thank you, Anders, for those thoughts and reflections. And it completely resonates also with my thinking on this. Is that we can only build on the strength of the relationships that are being created and developed within the cohort. So we have not announced, other than saying that there will be a virtual gathering in December. We've not announced a date. The thinking is that maybe we can do something in the second week of December and convene those who are here, as well as those who've been taking part throughout the year in the cohort, to just join us for a conversation about the future of the cohort, the mode of its operation. Certainly from our perspective, we're extremely thankful for the way in which it's been sustained creatively, the accessibility of it, etc. But there are also certain things that we long for, and that's being expressed here in terms of actually meeting face to face. Now, one possibility, and we have Mark in the room, one possibility is that we do have our international conference, the Responsible Leadership Academic Conference, taking place at Stellenbosch towards the end of March. I don't know whether things are going to allow us in terms of travel, whether maybe we link an in-person gathering to that. But that's certainly something, Mark, I think that we can discuss if you have appetite for that.
With great pleasure. I have to say, being physically in South Africa, it's a great relief to see some real people after a year online, and I can assure you we'll make everybody feel welcome if that works out. Since last Monday we're off the red list, so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that was, and we only found that out, as you say, a week ago, that we were off the red list, which means that suddenly prices for flying between London and South Africa has become completely ridiculous. So we will put out a date for second week of December for a conversation, but we'll also put out an email communication for your input. Yeah, so I think that's that's where we are right now. We'll look at the possibility of linking something to the Stellenbosch event. But as always,
when is that event? I'm sorry. When is that event?
It's the 16th to the 18th of March.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. But again, if there are other offers for hosting, we also need to think, I think, about the format of the cohort going forward, especially if it's going to continue being virtual or hybrid. I think the discussion about involving students has made me think, should this be a deans and students cohort every second meeting, or how could that work? Maybe. Yeah, so lots of ideas on that, but let's have a conversation specifically about the format, the future of the cohort, and its mode. And if you can't make it to that conversation, you'll still be able to provide input into it. So we'd love to continue to hold and support it. I think that moves us to a point where all that remains to be said, at least from my side, is to Maury and Lisa and Anne, a wonderful and big hug to the three of you for holding us and hosting us. It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing so much in terms of content and experience and learning, and all the stakeholders, the students, your partners, absolutely wonderful. So we're very grateful for that. And then to everyone that's participating and contributing to this, including also to Claire Maxwell and Anders Aspling for supporting the work. So thank you very, very much to everyone for joining us.
John, well, I was going to say, if I may, you all know I adore the three of you. I mean, Anders, Claire, and John are just just extraordinary human beings, right? I mean, the way that you do your job is extraordinary, but just as people, you're just remarkable individuals, and it is such an honor and a pleasure to work with you. And selfishly, I would just say, let's host the next one, if only because it gave us an opportunity to see you again more close up and in person, and just the magic and the way that you worked with us to create a flow of the day that made sense, and your willingness to be flexible with us, and you know, what about this, what about that? So a heartfelt thanks from Mason to the three of you, because I don't love going to a lot of conferences, but I relish the opportunity to be in this group, and in large part, I think that's due to your leadership. So thank you to the three of you.
Great. Much. Thank
you. Being British now. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That means a lot. Are we done, John?
Wait, we didn't do our chant.
Oh, should we do that?
Yeah.
We haven't done that in a while.
Oh, yeah. John.
Okay.
Can you?
Let's do that. Okay, so I'll do this. We're gonna say the first word.
If you do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. So we'll say the first word very softly, second word very softly, until we get to the final one, and then we shout it. Okay. So just repeat after me. We are.
We are.
We are here. We are here now. We are here now.
Okay, that feels like the end now.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a great weekend.
All right, thanks everybody. Great to see you.